Hey everyone, Kerry Walde here in the Air and Space Museum, and today I want to talk to you about religion and science. I want to talk to you about religion and science, and the common view of the two, specifically Christianity and science, is that they're in conflict. But that view is not true historically, philosophically, or methodologically. In these next few vlogs I want to share with you about this topic. First, let's look historically. Where are the roots of this idea that Christianity and science are in conflict? Today in academia, you almost have to pick one or the other. But in the early 1500s, 1600s, 1700s, where the scientific revolution really took off, we see that it was a foreign idea, that this was not the concept that really launched the scientific revolution. So we're looking at three people that really formed this idea and entrenched it in American society. We look at Thomas Huxley, a British man who really wanted to eliminate the religion and science, the influence that religion had in science in that day or in society. And so Thomas Huxley formed a group of people to really press that influence out, and he coined the term agnostic. Then there are two Americans that wrote two very popular books at the time in the 1800s, John William Draper and Andrew Dickson White. John William Draper was a chemist and a physician, and he wrote a book called The History of Warfare Between Religion and Science. And what he did really popularized this idea of this conflict, because his book was printed over 50 times and 10 different translations. But his book wasn't driven by historical facts, it was driven by personal agenda. And what it really was, it was a book that was an anti-Catholic diatribe pushing back against the Catholic immigration in the United States at that time. The second book is The History of Warfare Between Science and Christian Theology by Andrew Dickson White. Andrew Dickson White was a historian at the University of Michigan, and he really had issues because he was the first president of Cornell University, which was not affiliated with any religious denomination. He took a lot of heat for that at the time. And so he pushed back against that by writing this book. But as historians now know, his facts are bogus, and he misquotes a lot of people, and as he looks back in history, he really massages the facts of history to show, or to try to show, that there's this conflict between religion and history. For instance, he popularized the idea that Columbus was fighting against the church because the church were just old school flat earthers and they thought the earth was flat, which really wasn't true at all. It was the size of the earth issue that Columbus was dealing with. But most everybody back then knew that the earth was round. That was the prevailing thought. And what Andrew Dickson White did is he found two obscure people and their writings that they thought the earth was flat, and he emphasized those two where back in the day they really didn't have any influence. Then he also popularized the myth that the church forbade human dissection and thus being against scientific progress. And what he did is he took an isolated pull quote and misquotes Augustine in The City of God to try to substantiate this fact. But it wasn't true. And historians have gone through both of these works to show that they're absolutely bogus, and that science and religion were not in conflict at the launch of the scientific revolution. It's a relatively new idea. So for more about this, you can check out my blog, kerrywalde.com. Let me sum this up. Lawrence Principe, who is a historian of science at Johns Hopkins University, he says this: "Let me be clear. The idea that the scientific and religious camps have historically been separate and antagonistic is rejected by all modern historians of science." I'm Kerry Walde, signing off from the Air and Space Museum, Washington, D.C. Godspeed.